Hello and welcome back to the Flywheel Effect. This is Jordan with Live School, and this week I am joined by Dr. Crystal Thorpe. She's the principal of Fishers Junior High in Fishers, Indiana. She was also Indiana's Principal of the Year in 2021. She stopped by on the podcast today to tell us a little bit about the things principals can focus on, how they can take things off of teachers' plates, and how by lessening the stresses on your teachers, you're going to improve culture and climate in your building and eventually student success. I think you're going to enjoy this one. Happy listening.
No time, no tools, big expectations. How do you transform school culture without derailing the train? Answer: little wins that bring big changes. The flywheel effect. Harnessing the power of momentum to create a school culture that celebrates change and drives itself.
So, Crystal, thank you for coming on. I wanted to bring you on because you are kind of a renowned writer. Like, you've got some articles posted sort of all over the place in Ed Week and a few different places that speak about school leadership and things happening in schools. And the one that came across my desk that I thought was, something that would really resonate with our audience was the one you wrote in Ed Week. And it started with this quote. It started with, "Principals, it is time for a reset." And I want to start with that. Can you give me a brief summary of the situation you found your staff in and what decision you made based on that article? Because I think a lot of folks are gonna hear that and say, "Yeah, we were there too."
Oh my gosh, Jordan, when I'm a pretty reflective principal, and so every year I kind of think about some of the challenges, some of the successes that we've had in the previous year. And at the end of 2022, I was tired. And so I started to think about what were some of the things that happened in our building with my teachers that, I needed to address as a building leader. And so I just remember how in 2021, we started with not wearing masks. Then we were told we had to wear masks in September. I remember having a mother come up who was angry with me, telling us that we were sheep following blindly and that her child would never wear a mask. I remember being confronted by this parent and then the video being posted to social media. We had more fights in our building than we've had in years. And it was crazy because we would pride ourselves on building relationships with our students, and they just weren't having any of it. Another thing that was happening during that time, we had a really big controversial legislative bill. I think it was Senate Bill 1134. And that bill was going to regulate how we talked about race, how we talked about LGBTQ, whether or not books would be censored in our libraries. And I had a lot of teachers who were afraid that anything that they said could be misconstrued to mean something other than what they thought. And so all of that, along with my expectations as a building leader, I remember the moment that it really hit me. And it was the last day of school when we had our last teacher meeting. And as I looked out to my staff, there were not very many smiles. I could just see on their faces that they were tired, just like I was. They were tired too. And so I started thinking, what could I do as a building leader to pretty much protect my teachers? Because last year, I felt like they were not protected. I mean, we had parents on social media that were attacking our teachers. They were naming names, and we couldn't defend ourselves. The word indoctrination kept coming up over and over and over again. And even when I would share with people, we are teaching state standards, and one of the state standards is social justice, they didn't believe me. So it was a hard year, and I could just tell it, I could feel it, and I felt like I needed to do some things differently.
So I think pretty much everyone, if you were at a school and you weren't experiencing some of those things that were the last year and a half to 2 years, if you were in person 2 years ago, you consider yourself very lucky because I was not in the same state as Crystal, and I was experiencing all those things. That's how it was going on in my school too. It was very, very similar. What did you decide to do? How did you go about protecting your teachers? Because I do think there's something to be said about recognizing the situation, and then something even more to be said about doing something about it.
So my teachers know that I am one that tries to protect them anyway. And so I just started thinking about what were some things that we could do to make things just easier. Because I think sometimes people don't know or don't believe or don't think that teachers are human too. And these things bother them. Like we talked about things from teachers being considered heroes 1 minute and zeros the next minute. It's a lot of mental um, anguish, I think, that happens. And so, one of the things that I also forgot to talk about was just the lack of subs. And so, having teachers have to go in and teach classes in content areas that were not theirs. And so, here are some things that I decided to do. I decided to streamline all of my efforts in an effort to try to block out the outside noise. And so I was thinking one day about, okay, what are some of the initiatives that we're doing? How do I combine those initiatives? What can I cut out of the initiatives? What could be some things that maybe my counselors would be responsible for and not my teachers? And so what I came up with was what's most important to school. And so I was thinking that we have to focus on academics because that's what we're here for. We have to focus on behavior because we want to make sure that our kids, our students, are behaving the way that we expect them to behave. And then finally, it was culture. And so what I did was I took a look at all of our data and just information, and I'm like, you know what? This is what we need to do. And so, as a district level initiative was PLCs, professional learning communities. Another district level initiative was restorative practices. And then a third one, I was looking through my panorama survey data, and one of my former staff members who now works at central office, he reached out to me and he said, "Oh my gosh, Crystal, I'm looking at the information, and you guys, so it was something about my teachers, a survey that they took that showed where the number had jumped up to like maybe 89% of my teachers felt like they worked in a positive work environment, and it was up by 24%. However, the sense of belonging for my students has been stagnant now for about 2 or 3 years at maybe 43%, feeling like they belong in our school. And so when we started talking about culture, the focus for me was how do we create a sense of belonging where everybody who comes to our building feels like they are a part of this space?
There was we did a school culture survey around this time last year, and there was a great quote that came back from a teacher. I think it was in Washington, and she said something along the lines of, "We need to be a web school, or get back to being a web school where everybody belongs type school." And so that sense has been something that's been nationwide too. The jump there and your staff morale, that's outstanding. And I'm a firm believer in, if you take care of your staff, then they're going to take care of kids. So I think that sense of belonging for your kids, I think that's going to come over some time. I think that's going to come. What are you guys doing in the short term to help that?
So it's interesting because you just kind of stole my philosophy that I will share with everybody. And my leadership philosophy that I learned from one of my college professors was that I take care of my teachers first so that they can take care of who matter most. And so that has worked for me well in the last 15 years as a building leader because my teachers know that I am going to fight for them. And I fall short sometimes. And sometimes, there are things that I have to do, but they know that I have their best interest at heart. And in turn, we've done really good things by our kids. So when you talk about short term, getting back to like the student survey, one of the things that we talked about with our survey for our students, are we asking the right question? Because for the most part, our kids are pretty happy. We've had kids come back and say that junior high was the best time of their lives, which to me is like an oxymoron
Yeah,
because for most
that's
of
pretty
us,
wild.
right? Like I did not like junior high. And I will tell people that I student taught at a junior high, and that was not my jam. I couldn't take it, but I love being a junior high school principal. And so, some of the things that we've talked about in terms of ABCs for our academics, we really refocused our PLC work and we talked more about the making sure that our kids are learning the essentials. What are we doing when they don't learn it? How are we going to reteach formative assessments? We really cracked down on that. And it was hard because I had a lot of teachers that were still resistant. But we focused on making a more collaborative environment with our restorative practices. One of the things that we had to overcome was that I had teachers that felt like, are we just talking kids to death? And it's like, no, but we are trying to make them own their behavior and understand there still is a consequence to that behavior because our teachers felt like, well, we're just going to talk to them and send them back. And I'll be honest with you, in the first semester, and I don't know if it's just a different clientele, I'm trying to think if I think we've had maybe one physical altercation in our building this year as compared to last year. By this time, we might have had five or six. And when it comes to a sense of belonging, I throw that out to my staff members. We had a really powerful PD. And what we did was we had our teachers who had five or less years of teaching in the inner circle, and then the ones that were veterans on the outside of the circle. And the inside circle, they had to share what they needed from my veteran staff to be the best teacher that they could be. My outside group offered advice and words of wisdom and encouragement. I had people who were crying. I had new teachers come up to me and say, I finally feel seen. It was so interesting to do that, and relationships were formed. And so when we talk about a sense of belonging, it does bubble up to kids. So I've got teachers now. We have a game club night for our students and our families. She thought that it was going to be fun. Our families come in and they just play board games, sense of belonging. I've had people that are trying to create more clubs and opportunities for kids. We do have an LGBTQ club. We do have a photography club. We're trying to find other ways that our kids can feel like they belong here. We're going to end the semester with a mural, and it's going to be student centered. We're going to ask our students, what does it mean to be a Charger, which is our logo? And we're going to have our kids pick the best one. And we're going to put a mural kind of like, you belong here. This is us. This is our school. We haven't done it yet, but it's something that we're going to start with this Thursday. So just trying to hit those different things. We're working at it, man. We're chipping away at it. And I think eventually we'll get there.
Yeah, and that's that's part of it because the work you're doing to get there is what's creating those relationships on the way, and the that the whole idea of like every student on your campus should have somebody they can go and if they feel comfortable talking to, and like them feel like they belong on that campus is the right step for that to happen. So that's all really good work. And I'm glad you brought up the that PD you talked about because we talked about that on the a previous call off air, and I was hoping you'd bring that up. I think that's a really cool way to support new teachers, which we definitely need to do.
Yeah, because I actually had teachers tell me, or they shared that they felt like they didn't want to do this anymore. Like they already this younger generation, what a lot of people need to figure out is that this younger generation, they don't look at teaching as the ultimate end all be all profession in terms of something that is a secure job. They're looking for fulfillment. They're looking for happiness. They're looking for other things. And if we don't figure it out, the teaching shortage is going to get worse. But I'm just glad that we were able to have the conversation. And I'm building in some unofficial mentors to help talk to some of my newer teachers and hopefully help them understand too what it means to be a charger.
All right, so right before the break, we were talking about the things you were doing for new teachers, and like we even mentioned teacher shortage. I want to talk about a different article that you sent me that you had published because you gave a really insightful answer that I don't think a lot of folks are really brave enough to say. Um, and the question you were asked was, how would you encourage more people to become teachers? I want to hear your answer, and then let's kind of go from there. So, what was your answer to that question?
Man, oh, Jordan, I was sitting there. I think I was in my office at my house on the podcast, and I was hearing everybody give the politically correct answers. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh, and so I just said, I cannot encourage people to go into education right now. Like the profession that I love, and I love being a teacher. I've been at this for 30 years. It's not the same that it used to be. And so, knowing what I know now, it's hard. And I've spoken on college campuses. I've been out there recruiting the best and brightest, but it is hard for me to say this is the same profession that I loved 30 years ago.
We'll start big picture. What's one thing we could do to help that process? What can we change? Try to get it back to being something that's a desirable position again.
I think that we need to reprofessionalize teachers. And what I mean by that is that I felt like 30 years ago that I was respected. And I love telling people that I was a teacher. And when people found out, it's so funny. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but they'd sit a little taller and they'd lean in a little bit because it was something about being a teacher that people that they liked, that they loved, that made them feel good. But nowadays, I've had teachers come and tell me, my own teachers tell me that they are embarrassed to say that they work in a school. And it really, really breaks my heart. So, how do we get back to encouraging people to get back into education? We have to make it so that we are seen as professionals and experts and somehow regain the power that I think has been taken away from us. I feel like a lot of what we do has been politicized. And at the end of the day, for me, I am a public school educator. I expect my teachers to teach the standards. When people come in and say otherwise, that's not true. Now, I may have one or two rogue teachers that will do some things that are unacceptable, but that's for me to talk to them and make sure that I right the ship. But it's just unfortunate. People say teachers need more money. That's true. We need more money. But we also need to really look at what are some of the initiatives that teachers are expected to do. We are expected to do so much nowadays. And it's tough and it's stressful. And people feel like, you're a teacher, you're supposed to, but I'm human first. And I think people forget that. So even more recently, we are expected to teach SEL. We're expected to be here all day. We're expected to be here at night. I mean, there's so many things that go into this. And then even with, like I said, the new initiatives, there are reports out there that talk about, school to prison pipeline, and we want to, lessen that. But to whose detriment? I'm all about helping students, working through behaviors and creating a safe space. But that means a safe space for everybody. And so it sickens me when I see things on television about teachers getting beat up, harassed, killed, shot at in the classroom. So we have to go back and rethink what are our expectations for our educators and make sure that they are realistic, because I think somehow we've kind of gotten away from what it means to be a teacher, and right now it's not a good space.
Yeah, I think, and this is kind of something that always it was probably something that was joked about a long time ago. It's I just see it on Twitter now, but there's all like I feel like every time something happens, somebody says something along the lines of anybody like an elective office should spend some time in a classroom. I think that is 100% true. Honestly, I think if you're a parent, you should volunteer, spend like a day just so you kind of know what it's like in the school, and like you get a vibe of what you're doing, and you see all the things that teachers juggling, and so you understand really what's happening there. Like there's a lot to get through during the day. That's and for them to it would be kind of impossible most of the time for them to get to something that was controversial because of all the things they've got to do.
Yeah, but you're so right. It's crazy because my mayor of my city of Fishers, he came and he was principal for the day. And it actually only ended up being a couple of hours. But it was hilarious because after we talked, he had, I think, a newfound respect for what teachers do all day, and and he did it from a principal's perspective. And he, did some bus duty, made some announcements. He was actually in the classrooms, but he realized as well, what other profession, do we have where we have all of the checks and balances that we do as educators and the professionalism of licenses, all of the evaluations that we do. They can only go to restrooms, so many times during the day. I mean, it's a lot. And I think people kind of forget that because what I found is that there are a lot of teachers that make it look easy, and it's not easy. I just wanted to add that, when you talk about professionalizing education, one of the things that bothers me is that in our haste to try to encourage more people into the profession, we are taking out a lot of the licensing and things that teachers need to grow. So I was in a pinch last year and I hired a couple of teachers who had not gone to anybody's school of education. They were licensed through the subworld. And there is a big difference between people that actually go through a school of education and learn pedagogy as opposed to people that I like math. I took the praxis. Now I can teach. And we have to be very careful because I do want content area experts, teaching experts in front of my kids every day.
So that's a good kind of side subject that I've not really we've not really talked about on the podcast. Is well, a lot of places we're trying to address teacher shortages by making it easier to become a teacher instead of improving the experience of being a teacher. Is that kind of what how you felt that was going?
Jordan, you said a word right there. I mean, that's it. That's where our focus needs to be, is that we have to make, teaching a much more attractive job to have. And it's unfortunate because you read about other countries where teachers are high up on the totem pole when it comes to respect. Why is it in our country where, teachers are kind of, you're a teacher, whatever. Anybody can do it, somebody can do it. We'll find another replacement for you.
There's a lot of things we're talking about that like principals can't do anything about. Like you're you're sailing your boat, you're doing the best you can. Like some of these are just big picture problems. What are things that campus leaders can do to attract good teachers to their campus and keep them there? More importantly,
I think we need some sort of a nationwide marketing campaign about why teaching is important, right? We know that in terms of education and educators, everybody will have a teacher at some point in their lives. So last year, I got to sit in and listen to some folks talk about this, but it can't just be in Indiana. It can't just be in Kentucky, because what's happening is that we're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul. So we're swooping in and taking your teachers. What I've also noticed is that in our state, we are robbing each other, because there are some districts that will pay teachers a starting salary of 45,000 and another that will pay 38. Where are you going to go? We have to come to some collective agreement that this is what we're going to pay teachers no matter what. I know there's been some conversation about that, but I think the root of it is the why. Why do we need educators? Why do you want to be an educator? It is a rewarding profession.
it's you talked about the getting out of the way piece, and we talked about folks that everyone should like spend a little bit of time in a classroom, like just so you can understand. But everyone has is what's kind of funny about it. Like even when you were a kid, you were sitting there, but it's all about perspective and point of view. So I was kind of thinking, all these folks have been in classrooms, so like they should know how hard this job is, but they don't, because it's like kind of like sitting in a movie theater and understanding how hard the director's job was. Like it's not the same. Like it's all about perspective and seeing it from the lens of that teacher, understanding how hard it is to do his or her job would, I think, would make the respect for that job quite a bit more.
Absolutely. And just after my most recent article about protecting our profession, I had two more teachers leave. And one, she was going to make more money working, doing some digital design. And another was a math teacher, which, we have certain subjects that are really hard to find. He was having problems with childcare and, just couldn't keep up. We changed our start end times, and it was really a struggle for his family. And he's now writing curriculum for another organization where he's living at home. And so I think that's the other piece that people don't realize. Teachers have options now. There are a lot of other things that they can do. And I think when I was a teacher, I often thought I could maybe go into counseling, administration, maybe central office. Like those are the only things. But our teachers are realizing that there are other things that they can do where they can get paid what they're worth, and have some flexibility and not have to hear all the outside noise tell them that they're not good.
So I'm of the belief in the short term that's going to be rough, and it's like those folks you lost. That's not good because those are probably pretty quality people. I think in the long term that competition for teachers' talents and abilities, I think will force some good changes. Like we'll have to do some different things as far as safety in the workplace and compensation and schedule and those kind of things to make it. But I think that'll make the profession stronger in the long run. Competition is usually a good thing.
But I think what's also happened too is that I do think that in inner city urban schools, this has been happening for years now, and they've been talking about it. Nobody's really been listening. I live in a suburban, affluent area that's been listed multiple times as being one of the best places to live in the country. We're experiencing it. And unfortunately, fortunately, I think because we're seeing it everywhere, my hope is that people really will take a look at it and see what can we do? How can we make things better? Because it's happening everywhere.
Yeah, I totally agree. Um, Crystal, I want to. You just got through dismissal, and you guys have got a blizzard on your hands, and
And
I
a
don't want to keep
basketball
you
game tonight.
at a basketball game tonight. I don't want to keep you all evening. If you may want to reach out, and they had extra questions for you, how could they find you? You mentioned LinkedIn. Is it okay if I put your LinkedIn on the show notes?
Sure, you can share LinkedIn, and I do have a Twitter. I've been on a social media fast here for the last couple of weeks. I'm tired of going down the rabbit hole of crazy, but those are two ways that people can reach out to me. And I'm always excited to share what little knowledge I have. I have strong opinions that are my own. So if anybody wants to reach out, I'm here.
Yeah, and I'll definitely I'll have the two articles we mentioned that Crystal penned. We'll have those in the show notes as well. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.
The flywheel effect, harnessing the power of momentum to create a school culture that celebrates change and drives itself.